So as a dungeon master, you have a lot of responsibility. You're there to run the adventure, and in running the adventure, advance the narrative, tell the story, resolve all the rules, deal with all of the wonderful things that the players are going to come up with, in addition to managing the game, making sure that every player at your table, whether it's virtual or tabletop, that they are heard, that they have a chance to contribute, that they are enjoying Dungeons & Dragons as they like to enjoy it. And finally, what's often missed by many dungeon masters is that you are a player also. As a DM, you're playing a different aspect of the game, but you need to be having fun also. You need to be having excitement running the adventure, running the encounters, interacting with the player characters and the NPCs, the non-player characters. The moment you begin to lose that spice, that flavor, that flair, that spark of a DM, bringing that passion to the game, begins to diminish. And then you stop having fun. And Dungeons & Dragons, above and beyond bringing the community together, is about everyone sitting down, taking some time out of real life, out of boring things like work and school and other responsibilities, and rolling some dice, having some laughs, and crafting and telling a real story as people. So all of this is placed on the Dungeon Master, which when you're new to D&D and you run your first couple of adventures, it is natural to think and be a little nervous. Am I doing this correctly? What if this happens? And the what if could be anything. What if I mess up an encounter? What if I forget a rule? What if the players want to do something and I'm really not sure? Or what if the players do something and I make it happen or I allow it to happen and the adventure kind of goes off the rails and goes kind of crazy? All of this thinking at that level helps to diminish what I call as a dungeon master your vision and your voice. Now, we all have unique talents as a DM. Some of us like classic dungeon adventures, some more role play, some a mix. In that moment, you running and articulating the type of adventure that you want to run. In that moment, that passion, that uniqueness, that is you, that creativity. That's your vision, that's your voice. And that's what we want to bring to every single game. So if we can get to a point where we facilitate that, it's going to be an awesome adventure. So this leads into the most important Dungeon Master rule. There's 10 of them. And in the next couple of vlogs, we're going to explore them. Kind of think of them as a Dungeons & Dragons DM toolkit, things that you can utilize. And the reason why this is number one is because this is the foundation. This is the foundation that everything else is built on. And this is the number one rule that you're always going to go back to. So the number one rule, as a Dungeon Master, you can never make a mistake. What I mean by that is the rules are completely optional. The rules are completely optional. A perfect example, we were heading down to a D&D convention, and we're driving in the car. Everyone's in the car, and let's play some D&D. I mean, we're driving down to Florida. We've got like a day's worth of a day and a half, 2 days, whatever it is, of driving. Like, let's just play some D&D. And I have so many adventures in my mind at this point, I can just kind of almost play them out without the notes. So I'm like, all right, I'll DM. And everyone envisioned a level 1 character. A level 1 character. So you had your level 1 character, level 1 equipment. And we're playing D&D essentially no character sheets on the fly, adventure about 90%, and no dice. And we had a great time playing that game, and we got to play in character and really enjoy it from that. Now, yes, the dice are important because they build narrative. The rules are important because that is the language to communicate the story. It's not that these things are not important, but I say they're optional because in that moment, as a dungeon master, not being able to make a mistake, knowing that you cannot make a mistake, it's okay. If you forget something, if there's a rule you don't use, if there's something you don't understand, make the call and keep the story going. Now, this pulls into a secondary piece. This is important. This is kind of rule number 2, but we need to kind of pull it in a little bit to rule number 1. You sit down at the table, and again, tabletop, virtual. You sit down and you're with your players. You're already in that kind of D&D state as a dungeon master because you've got your notes out. You've been thinking about the adventure a little bit before. You're ready to go. But your players, as they come into the table or as they come into the lobby, they're thinking about, yes, they're thinking about D&D and they're pumped, but they're like, okay, I have to do this, or I was doing this before that. I've got to write that paper that I've been putting off for 2 weeks, which actually I have been putting off for 2 weeks. And their mind is thinking about other things. And then as they sit down and you begin to tell the story and you begin the adventure, the players get anchored to the table and the players literally immerse themselves in the world. I call this flow. You're pulling them into the flow of the adventure. And in that moment, this is what's exciting about D&D. It's you and the players existing in this world that you are creating together. We don't want to break that flow. Now, when you forget a rule or you have to look something up, that's okay, or you're not really sure. This is why it's important as a DM, just make the call. Don't worry about right or wrong. You can't mess things up right or wrong. It's okay. Just, yes, you can do that. Make that skill check. Or I want to do this. And you're like, oh, what's the DC on that? Make it reasonable. DC 15. Okay. Well, that's maybe a little high. DC 12, DC 10. Or just have them roll a D20 and whatever it is, make a decision in that moment. You know, that is the perspective. That is where we want to go, because we want to free ourselves of this thought of, I'm not doing this right. There is no right or wrong as a DM. There's just you. We want to find our vision. We want to find our voice. As soon as you can begin to, and look, sometimes it's easier said than done. Absolutely, right? You've got a table of 10 or 15 players or 5 or 6 players, or you're running a big event, or it's the final act of the campaign. Or it's something as simple as your first adventure, your very, very first adventure. Understand, you can't make a mistake. Make a decision, move forward, keep the narrative going. And if you do that, your players will have an awesome time. I guarantee it. And it won't be like later, they'll be like, actually, you know what? I just realized this 3 hours ago. Fritz had me make a DC check, and I rolled a D20 and I got like an 8 with modifiers because it was an offer roll, or maybe I had disadvantage. And there's no way that was a DC 8. It had to be a minimum 12 because the rules say this and the challenge ratings say that. No one's ever going to realize that in the moment. All they're going to realize, all they're going to look for is your narrative.